What happens when the very system you swore to uphold turns against you? Meet Zane Hartley, a brilliant, rising star in the world of criminal defense. A man who once fought for justice, believing in the sanctity of the law. But when a scandalous accusation lands him in prison, everything changes. Accused of a crime he didn't commit, betrayed by those closest to him, Zane must fight not only for his freedom, but for the truth. In a world where corruption runs deep and power is hidden in the shadows, Zane discovers a chilling reality: the truth can be the deadliest weapon. As Zane uncovers a web of lies and betrayal, he'll have to outsmart the very people who destroyed his life, and take on an enemy far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The real power lies not in the courts, but in the shadows. This is a fight for more than just justice. This is a fight for survival. Are you ready to uncover the secrets? To witness the battle that will change everything? Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. Zane Walker, a renowned public defense attorney in New York, had dedicated his entire life to upholding justice. He was known for fighting for the truth, defending those who had no voice in society, and, above all, believing that the legal system could bring justice to all. But little did he know, he would soon become its victim. It all started with a particularly high-profile case Zane was handling. A man was accused of murder, and although there wasn't enough concrete evidence, Zane decided to defend him. Winning the case made Zane famous, but it also set him on a dangerous path, one that he never saw coming. Months later, Zane found himself accused of fabricating evidence in the very case he had fought so hard for. False evidence had been presented in court, and even more shockingly, the key witness against him was his wife, Emily. She testified that Zane had altered the evidence to protect the defendant, which had ultimately led to an unjust verdict. Emily was the only one who could put Zane in this trap, and she had done it. Standing in the courtroom, Zane's heart sank as he heard the verdict. He couldn't believe what was happening. Despite his best efforts, he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. His entire world came crashing down. He couldn't understand why Emily, the woman he had loved and trusted with his life, would betray him. Everything he had believed in now seemed hollow. In prison, Zane was overwhelmed by loneliness and despair. However, he knew he couldn't just sit there and let this injustice consume him. He had to do something. That's when he met Ryan, a rough-looking man with an extraordinary intellect when it came to technology. Ryan was a former hacker, and though he had been imprisoned for his crimes, he was still capable of infiltrating complex security systems. Zane knew that, with Ryan's help, he might stand a chance at uncovering the truth. Day by day, Zane and Ryan worked together to investigate the case. Ryan taught Zane how to use digital tools to hack into security systems, breach accounts, and track communications. With the information they gathered, they began to uncover clues that Zane had never considered. One day, Zane received an anonymous letter from a former neighbor. The letter revealed that someone had been entering his house while he was away. Everything began to fall into place. Zane realized that someone had been tampering with things while he wasn't around. Was it Emily? Had she truly betrayed him? The answer came soon enough, as Zane dug deeper into the evidence. Through careful investigation, Zane discovered a horrifying conspiracy. Emily and Derek Hayes, the prosecutor who had represented the state against Zane, not only had an affair but had also conspired together to frame him. They had planned it all along, and the fabricated evidence was a crucial part of their scheme. What was even worse, Zane uncovered that Judge Valerie Cross, the one who had presided over his case, had been bribed by Derek and Emily to deliver an unfair verdict. Zane knew he couldn't stay in prison any longer while those responsible for his conviction went free. With Ryan's help, he executed a daring escape. By hacking into the prison's security systems, Zane managed to escape without leaving a trace. But this was just the beginning. After breaking free, Zane continued his journey to gather more evidence and confront those who had betrayed him. He hacked into Emily and Derek's accounts, uncovering text messages, emails, and financial documents that showed their corruption. Zane also uncovered crucial details about Judge Cross's involvement. Now, he was no longer alone in this fight. Every step he took was carefully calculated to break apart the alliance between Emily, Derek, and Cross. Zane wasn't just seeking revenge, he wanted the truth to come out and justice to be served. He decided to orchestrate a secret meeting with all the parties involved in the case. There, Zane presented the undeniable truth. Armed with the evidence he had collected, he confronted Emily, Derek, and Cross. There was no way for them to deny it now, every secret had been exposed. Emily, Derek, and Judge Cross were arrested and charged with corruption, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. The truth was irrefutable, and Zane was finally exonerated. Justice had been served, but the price Zane had paid was steep. He had lost his wife, his faith in the system he once served, but in the end, he had found a new purpose in life. After his exoneration, Zane decided not to stop there. He founded the Walker Legal Initiative, an organization dedicated to defending the wrongfully accused and pushing for legal reform. Zane crossed paths with Kara, a talented investigator who had always believed in his innocence from the start. Together, they began to build a new future. Zane had found a new purpose, and though the past couldn't be erased, he was determined to continue the fight for justice. In the end, Zane not only won the battle against those who betrayed him but also opened a new chapter in his life, where he could help others who were being wronged by the legal system. From the darkness of betrayal, Zane stepped into the light, bringing hope to those still oppressed by a flawed system. And though his life would never be the same, Zane had found his faith in justice once again. After the chaos of the trial and the downfall of his former allies, Zane Walker found himself at a crossroads. He had reclaimed his freedom, but his life, once full of promise, now seemed uncertain. Although he was cleared of the charges and had exposed the corruption that had almost destroyed him, the scars of betrayal remained. He had lost Emily, his trust in the legal system, and a part of his own soul. Yet, amidst the wreckage, a new resolve began to take root within him. Zane knew he couldn't just walk away from the fight. He had seen the flaws in the justice system too clearly, and it was now up to him to be a voice for those who were still suffering from its imperfections. The Walker Legal Initiative was born out of this sense of duty, not just for his own redemption but for the sake of others who had been wrongfully convicted or mistreated by the very system meant to protect them. Kara, the determined investigator who had stood by Zane during his darkest hours, became an invaluable ally in this new chapter. Together, they pored over cases of people who had been wrongfully imprisoned or sentenced based on falsified evidence or the negligence of corrupt officials. The more they uncovered, the more Zane realized how deep the problem ran. His own case had been only the tip of the iceberg. As the months passed, the initiative gained momentum, and Zane found himself a leader in the movement for justice reform. But it wasn't an easy path. The power structures that protected the corrupt within the system were not willing to go down without a fight. Zane knew that exposing the truth would come at a cost, and as he had learned, betrayal could come from the most unexpected places. One evening, Zane received a tip that would change everything. It was an encrypted message, sent from an anonymous source, claiming that the corruption within the legal system went even further than he had imagined. The message contained documents that hinted at a vast conspiracy involving not only prosecutors, judges, and politicians, but also powerful figures in law enforcement. The list of names was chilling. People who Zane had once considered allies and mentors were now implicated in a web of lies, power plays, and illegal dealings. Zane knew that exposing these names could not only destroy the initiative but also put him and those he cared about in grave danger. Still, he had made a vow when he escaped from prison, to never let the corrupt get away with their crimes again. With Kara's help, Zane began to investigate the source of the tip. They traced the encrypted message back to a secure server that had been wiped clean, but with the help of a few trusted tech experts they'd gathered through the initiative, they were able to recover fragments of data. The investigation led them to a former prosecutor, now living in hiding, who had once worked alongside Derek Hayes. This man had turned whistleblower but had been silenced by threats and bribes from those still in power. The prosecutor, a man named Samuel Kane, agreed to meet with Zane, but only under strict conditions. He had been in hiding for years, terrified for his life. His testimony could expose everything, but it would also make him a target. Still, Samuel's conscience had caught up with him, and he wanted to do the right thing. The meeting was set in a remote, undisclosed location, and Zane and Kara were prepared for whatever might come. As Zane entered the dimly lit room where they were to meet Samuel, his heart raced. This could be the breakthrough he needed, or it could be the end of the road for everything he had worked for. The door creaked open, and a man, unshaven and nervous, stepped forward. Samuel looked like someone who had seen too much corruption, too much darkness. "I have the evidence," Samuel said, his voice shaking. "But you need to know, this is bigger than you think. This isn't just about Derek Hayes or Valerie Cross. There are names in this list, names you wouldn't believe." Zane leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about? Who else is involved?" Samuel handed over a folder containing documents and photographs, proof of a network of corruption stretching across multiple states. At the top of the list was the name of a powerful political figure, Senator William Thatcher, someone Zane had never suspected. The evidence suggested that Thatcher was the mastermind behind the entire scheme, pulling strings from behind the scenes to control the legal system and ensure the convictions of the innocent for political gain. "I'm telling you this because I know what's at stake," Samuel continued. "Thatcher is untouchable. He's too powerful. But if you go after him, if you make this public, you're going to start a war. The whole system could collapse." Zane's mind raced. He knew this was the next step in his crusade for justice, but he also understood the consequences. Taking down Senator Thatcher would mean going up against the most powerful figures in the country. It wasn't just about fighting for the truth anymore, it was about surviving a battle that could cost him everything. Kara looked at Zane, sensing his hesitation. "We've come this far, Zane. We can't stop now. This is the truth we've been searching for. It's the only way to finally fix the system." Zane nodded, his jaw tightening. He knew Kara was right. If he backed down now, it would all be for nothing. He had fought too long and too hard to let fear control him. "All right," Zane said, his voice firm. "We go after Thatcher. We expose everything." But as Zane walked out of that room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just entered into a much larger game. This wouldn't just be about clearing his name anymore, it would be a battle for the future of justice itself. And in this war, no one would be safe. Zane Walker stood at the precipice of a fight bigger than he had ever imagined. The documents Samuel Kane handed him weighed heavily in his hands, their contents like a time bomb waiting to explode. Senator William Thatcher's name loomed at the top of the list, an unexpected figure, someone so entrenched in power that Zane had never thought to question his integrity. But now, with the damning evidence in his hands, Zane knew that the battle for justice would soon take on a much darker, more dangerous tone. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Zane and Kara worked around the clock, going over every detail, every piece of evidence. They had to be careful. One wrong move and the entire operation could be compromised. If they exposed Thatcher, they would not only be up against corrupt judges and prosecutors, they would be taking on a network of political power that stretched far beyond New York. With the help of a few trusted allies within the initiative, Zane and Kara meticulously planned their next steps. They knew that going public with the evidence immediately would be suicide. Thatcher had too many resources, too many loyal followers in the media and government. No, they needed to build a case first, one that could stand up to the immense pressure they would face. They began by reaching out to investigative journalists who had a reputation for taking on the most powerful figures in the country. One of them, a reporter named Sarah Mills, had been trying to crack down on political corruption for years but had always been blocked by the sheer magnitude of the people involved. Sarah was known for her fearless pursuit of the truth, and she was the perfect person to help them expose the larger conspiracy. Late one night, Zane and Kara met Sarah at a secluded cafe, far from any prying eyes. Sarah had a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor, but there was a weariness in her eyes, as if the weight of all the stories she'd uncovered had taken a toll on her. When Zane handed her the folder, her eyes widened. This is bigger than I thought," Sarah said, flipping through the documents quickly. "This goes all the way to the top. Thatcher has his hands in everything, judges, police, even lawmakers from other states. If we're going to go after him, we'll need airtight proof. But I think this is it. We've got him." Zane felt a surge of hope, but it was short-lived. The closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. They had to act quickly. Thatcher was no fool, he'd been in politics too long not to know that someone might eventually come after him. Zane had to be careful. The people who controlled the system were ruthless. The first step was to plant a seed of doubt among Thatcher's closest allies. Zane knew that if he could create enough discord, they could bring him down from the inside. They began to gather more information, targeting key members of Thatcher's circle, people who might have been willing to sell him out if given the right incentive. That's when they encountered something they hadn't expected, a whistleblower from within the political machine itself. Edward Marshall, a former campaign manager for Thatcher's Senate run, reached out to Zane with an encrypted message. He claimed to have witnessed the senator's manipulation of the legal system firsthand, how Thatcher had used his influence to ensure that certain people were wrongfully convicted, all to control the political landscape and maintain his grip on power. Edward had worked for Thatcher for years, but when he realized the true cost of the senator's actions, he couldn't stay silent anymore. He was scared, terrified that his association with Thatcher would make him a target. But the evidence he held could be the key to destroying everything Thatcher had built. Zane and Kara arranged to meet Edward at a safe house, far from the prying eyes of any of Thatcher's operatives. The meeting was tense, with Edward constantly looking over his shoulder, paranoid about being followed. But when he handed over the stack of documents, emails, recordings, and financial transactions, it was clear that the game had changed. "This is the smoking gun," Zane said, as he pored over the materials. "With this, we can connect Thatcher directly to the corruption." Kara nodded. "But we still need more. We need witnesses, people willing to testify publicly. Without that, this is just paper." They were right. They needed more than just documents. They needed the truth to be spoken aloud, and they needed people with the courage to come forward. But who could they trust? The answer came from an unlikely source. Ryan, the hacker who had helped Zane escape prison, had been quietly gathering intel of his own. He had tracked down several former employees of Thatcher's political network, people who had been quietly dismissed, their careers ruined for trying to stand up to the senator's machinations. One of them, a woman named Caroline Hughes, had been a key member of Thatcher's legal team. After she had exposed a series of fraudulent actions taken by one of Thatcher's key allies, her life had been destroyed. But now, with her career in tatters and nowhere else to turn, she was willing to talk. Caroline agreed to meet Zane and Kara in a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city. She arrived with caution, looking over her shoulder as if she feared the shadows themselves. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with the weight of everything she had seen. But when she spoke, her voice was clear, resolute. "I know what you're trying to do," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And I'm willing to help you. But you need to understand something, Thatcher's people are everywhere. If you bring him down, they will come after you. All of you. They'll stop at nothing to protect him." Zane met her gaze, determination in his eyes. "We're not backing down. We need the truth, Caroline. We need you." Caroline hesitated, then nodded. "All right. I'll tell you everything." The moment Caroline began to speak, Zane knew the final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. She revealed how Thatcher had used his influence to destroy lives, manipulate the legal system, and push political agendas by ensuring that certain people were framed for crimes they didn't commit. His empire was built on lies and broken people. But even as Caroline provided the evidence they needed, Zane felt a growing sense of unease. They were getting closer to Thatcher, but they were also drawing closer to a confrontation that would change everything. As they prepared to make their move, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. The moment Caroline Hughes shared her story, Zane knew they were on the edge of a precipice. The evidence she provided, while damning, could easily be dismissed or manipulated if they didn't act quickly. Senator Thatcher's empire of lies and corruption was vast, and his people were everywhere. It wasn't just about taking down a few corrupt individuals anymore, it was about bringing down an entire system that had been rigged from the inside for years. The stakes were higher than ever, and Zane could feel the walls closing in. "We need to get this information to the public," Kara said, breaking the heavy silence after Caroline's revelations. "We can't keep waiting around. Thatcher's people are bound to figure out that we're onto them." Zane nodded, his mind racing. "But we still need a strategy. If we release all of this without careful preparation, it'll be too easy for them to discredit us or cover it up. We need to make sure we're ahead of them at every turn." They spent the next few days making meticulous plans. The evidence from Caroline, along with the documents Samuel Kane and the whistleblowers had provided, was enough to expose Thatcher's criminal network. They couldn't just dump it all into the public domain, though. They needed to go public with a bang, something that would demand immediate action from law enforcement and the media. The first step was to contact Sarah Mills, the investigative journalist who had been helping them. Together, they devised a plan to release the information to a trusted news outlet while simultaneously coordinating with law enforcement. Zane knew that if they didn't move fast, Thatcher would use his influence to silence anyone involved. "We need to pick the perfect moment," Zane said. "We can't let them get the upper hand." Kara looked at him, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We need to force their hand. If we sit back and wait, they'll find a way to stop us. We need to push them into a corner." Zane agreed. Time was running out. The night before the plan was set into motion, Zane couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been building inside him. It wasn't just the danger they were facing, it was something deeper, something more personal. He thought about the sacrifices he'd already made, his career, his reputation, and most painfully, his marriage to Emily. Despite everything she had done to him, part of him still wanted to believe that there was some shred of good left in her. But deep down, he knew there was no going back. His fight for justice had become something much larger, something that could no longer be undone. As the hours ticked down, Zane found himself staring out of his apartment window, lost in thought. Kara came up behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but full of concern. Zane took a deep breath, shaking his head slightly. "I don't know. This is bigger than anything I've ever faced. It's not just about me anymore. It's about everything I believed in. About a system that was supposed to be fair, but it's anything but." Kara nodded, her gaze unwavering. "You're doing the right thing. This system won't change unless people like you stand up. You've already come so far, and now we're so close to taking it down." Zane turned to face her, his eyes hard with determination. "We will. But once we do, nothing will ever be the same." The next morning, the plan was set into motion. Zane, Kara, and Sarah worked with precision, making sure the information was carefully packaged, ready to be released to the media at the exact moment when law enforcement would be ready to act. It was risky. If they tipped their hand too soon, Thatcher's network would have time to react and silence everyone involved. At the same time, Zane arranged a meeting with the whistleblower, Edward Marshall, in a secluded park. He knew it was dangerous, but it was the last piece of the puzzle they needed to ensure the truth would come out. Edward had been terrified of the fallout, but his conscience had driven him to this moment. As Zane approached the meeting point, he scanned the area, sensing the danger that loomed in the air. But when he arrived, Edward wasn't there. Zane waited, his heart pounding in his chest, but there was no sign of him. He tried calling Edward's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Damn it," Zane muttered under his breath. "Where is he?" Kara, who had been monitoring the situation from a distance, called him immediately. "Zane, you need to get out of there. Now." Zane's mind raced. He didn't need to ask why. They knew something was wrong. Thatcher's people had found out about the meeting. This was the moment when everything started to unravel. Zane looked around, trying to assess his surroundings. He felt a rush of adrenaline and knew that he couldn't afford to waste any time. He turned and began to walk quickly toward the exit of the park, but before he could make it, he saw a car pull up at the far end of the street. Two men stepped out, big, imposing figures in dark suits. It was a setup. The game had just changed. Zane sprinted for cover, ducking behind a large tree as the men closed in. Kara's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Zane, get out of there now. They're coming for you." He didn't wait for further instructions. Zane knew the stakes had just escalated. The truth was out there, but it wasn't in his hands anymore. He had to survive. They had to survive. Later that evening, as Zane and Kara regrouped at a safe house, Zane couldn't help but wonder if this had been an inevitable part of the plan. Thatcher had too much power to let something like this slip through his fingers. Zane's phone buzzed with a new message, the screen lighting up with a name he hadn't expected, Emily. Zane's stomach dropped. Why was she reaching out now? His hand trembled as he opened the message. "Zane, I never meant for any of this to happen. You have to listen to me. I'm not the person you think I am. They've threatened me, Zane. Please, don't trust anyone. They know everything. They'll come after you next." Zane stared at the message, his heart torn. Emily had betrayed him once, but could she be telling the truth now? Was it a trap? He didn't know who to trust anymore. As Zane looked at the words on the screen, he realized that the web of lies and betrayal had woven itself around him more tightly than he could have ever imagined. The danger had always been there, lurking in the shadows, but now it was personal. Emily's involvement, whether genuine or another trap, was a game-changer. He couldn't be sure who was on his side, but he did know one thing: it was only a matter of time before the walls came crashing down. And Zane was prepared for the fight of his life. Zane sat in the dimly lit room of the safe house, staring at his phone. The message from Emily haunted him, gnawing at his thoughts. He didn't know what to believe. Part of him wanted to trust her, to believe that somewhere inside, she still cared. But his mind kept circling back to the years of lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal. The truth was, he was no longer sure who his allies were, and the people he thought he could trust were no longer certain. Kara, sitting across from him, broke the silence. "You can't trust her, Zane. Not now." Zane's gaze flickered to her. She had been by his side through everything, his trial, his escape, and the dark path of retaliation that had followed. Her loyalty was unquestionable. But this was different. Emily had been part of the machine that nearly destroyed him. Was there any way she could be telling the truth now? "I don't know," Zane muttered, his voice low. "She says they're coming for me. But is it just another lie? Another way to draw me in?" Kara's expression hardened. "You can't afford to take that risk. You've already been burned once by her. If you listen to her now, it could cost you everything." Zane clenched his fists. He hated the uncertainty. It gnawed at him, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. But Kara was right. This wasn't about old feelings. This was about survival. He couldn't let Emily distract him, not now, not when they were so close. "I'll reach out to her," Zane said, a decision forming in his mind. "But only on my terms. If she really wants to help, then I need proof. I won't fall for any more games. Kara nodded but didn't seem entirely convinced. She had seen Zane's vulnerabilities, his humanity, and she knew that no matter how strong he appeared, the weight of his past was always a shadow in the corner of his mind. Be careful, Kara warned. The more we dig, the more dangerous it gets. We're dealing with people who can destroy anyone who gets too close. Including you. Zane's phone buzzed again, this time with a call. He didn't have to look to know who it was. Emily. Taking a deep breath, he answered the call. Zane, please, listen to me, her voice cracked through the speaker, filled with urgency. They know everything. Thatcher's people are watching you, watching all of us. They're already making their move. You don't have much time. They've set everything in motion. Zane's heart pounded in his chest. What are you talking about, Emily? What do they want? They want you dead, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thatcher's not the only one pulling the strings. There's someone else, someone even more dangerous. I don't know how to explain it. But if you don't leave now, if you don't disappear, they'll come for you. Zane's mind raced. Another player? Someone more dangerous than Thatcher. Who? Zane demanded. Who else is involved? I can't say too much, but, Emily hesitated. There's a man. A shadow figure who's been working behind the scenes for years. His name's Victor Blackwell. He's the real power behind Thatcher. He's the one who runs everything. If you take down Thatcher, Blackwell will come for you. I've seen it happen before. The name hit Zane like a freight train. Victor Blackwell. He had never heard of him, but now, it was all making sense. Every time Zane had thought he was getting closer to the truth, it had slipped through his fingers. This wasn't just a battle against corrupt politicians and law enforcement, it was a battle against an invisible force that had orchestrated everything from the shadows. Zane didn't say anything for a moment. He was processing, trying to piece it together. How do you know all of this, Emily? I've been working for him, she confessed, her voice trembling. I had no choice. But I can't keep doing it. Zane, she broke off, a sob escaping her lips. I never wanted any of this. But if you go after Blackwell, they'll destroy you. Zane's grip tightened on the phone. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He couldn't just walk away now. He had already come too far. But how could he fight an enemy who operated in the shadows, an enemy who controlled everything from behind the scenes? I'll need proof, Emily, Zane said firmly. I'm not going to walk into a trap again. If you want me to believe you, you need to give me something I can use. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a soft sigh. I can give you the access codes. Blackwell's encrypted files. They'll show everything, the connections, the transactions, the deals he's made. But you have to act quickly. He's already onto you. Zane felt the weight of her words settle into his bones. If Emily was telling the truth, this was bigger than he had ever imagined. Blackwell wasn't just a politician or a judge. He was the puppet master. The one who pulled the strings of an entire system, a system Zane had thought was broken but had no idea how deep the rot went. I'll get the information, Zane said, determination in his voice. But you need to get out. Leave the city. They'll come for you next. I can't, Emily replied softly. I've already lost everything. But you still have a chance. Don't let them win, Zane. You have to finish this. For all of us. Zane's heart ached at the desperation in her voice. He had always believed that Emily's betrayal was a result of her own choices, her own desires. But now, the weight of what she had endured, the manipulation, the threats, was becoming clearer. She wasn't the villain he had made her out to be. She had been another victim of the same corrupt system that had nearly destroyed him. But Zane didn't have the luxury of letting his emotions cloud his judgment. He couldn't afford to trust her fully, not yet. He had to keep his focus on the bigger picture. Blackwell had to be stopped. If he didn't, the system would stay broken, and more innocent people would pay the price. "I'll get the codes," Zane said. "Then I'll take Blackwell down." Over the next few days, Zane and Kara worked tirelessly to prepare. They knew the risk was monumental, but they also knew that the time for hesitation was over. They had the evidence they needed. If Emily's information was correct, it could be the key to exposing Blackwell's entire operation. But Zane also knew they couldn't act blindly. The storm was coming, and they had to be ready. Every move had to be calculated, precise. There was no room for mistakes. As they continued to prepare for the final confrontation, Zane received a call from an unexpected source, Sarah Mills, the investigative journalist who had helped them before. "I've got news," Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. "I've been working the story, and I've found something you need to see. Blackwell's operations go deeper than you think. He's not just a shadow figure, he has connections all over the world. And Zane, I think you're closer to the truth than you realize. But you need to be careful. People are starting to talk, and if Blackwell finds out you're coming for him, it's not just you he'll be after." Zane's pulse quickened. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and he couldn't afford to hesitate. "Not anymore. We're ready," Zane said. "We'll take him down." But even as he spoke the words, he felt a growing sense of unease. They were walking into a war, one that would change everything. And he wasn't sure who would survive it. The storm was here. Zane could feel it in the air. The whispers in the streets. The men who watched him from the corners of his vision. And the subtle shift in the weight of his decisions. Everything had been building to this moment, the confrontation with the true puppet master, Victor Blackwell. Zane sat in a small, nondescript room in an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. Kara was beside him, and Sarah Mills had been the one to deliver the final piece of the puzzle. Blackwell was not just some isolated figure hiding behind political deals, he was a global player, connected to powerful criminal syndicates, arms deals, human trafficking, and much worse. His influence reached into every major city, every corner of government, and every sector of society that mattered. He was untouchable. But Zane wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid because he had one thing Blackwell didn't, the truth. "Sarah's right," Kara said, looking over the encrypted files on her laptop. "This is it. Blackwell's empire is built on lies, on blood. If we expose this, there's no way he can keep his power. But we'll need every bit of evidence we've got, and every ally." Zane nodded, his eyes hardening. "It's time to expose him. We've waited too long for this." The final pieces of the puzzle were in place. Emily had delivered the access codes to Blackwell's encrypted files, and Sarah had corroborated everything they had suspected. But now, Zane knew that this fight wasn't just about taking down one corrupt individual, it was about dismantling an entire system that had been operating under the radar for decades. Blackwell was the linchpin, the mastermind behind it all. "We're going to do this now," Zane said, determination in his voice. "I've already contacted the journalists we trust. We'll leak the evidence to them in one fell swoop, every file, every transaction, every dirty deal Blackwell's been involved in. But we need to be ready," Kara warned, looking at him with a seriousness he hadn't seen before. "Once we expose him, there's no going back. We'll have made ourselves enemies of the most dangerous people in the world. The fight will be global." Zane didn't hesitate. He had already made peace with the fact that his life would never be the same. There was no going back. There was only forward. "Let's burn this down." The release of the files was a calculated move. They didn't just drop the bomb all at once, they orchestrated a series of coordinated leaks, each one more damning than the last. Media outlets from around the world picked up the story, and in a matter of hours, Blackwell's empire began to unravel. The files revealed everything. Financial transactions linking him to corrupt governments, his dealings with criminal organizations, his involvement in human rights violations, and the destruction of innocent lives to maintain his grip on power. The world's attention turned toward him, and the pressure mounted. But Blackwell wasn't just going to sit back and let it happen. Zane knew they were walking into the lion's den. As the evidence was being disseminated, Blackwell's forces began moving against them. Zane, Kara, and their small team went into hiding, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. It wasn't enough to expose Blackwell, they needed to survive long enough to see justice done. The media frenzy exploded as the truth came to light. Blackwell's allies in the political and corporate world scrambled to distance themselves from him. Key players began to betray him, one by one. It was as if the entire world had turned on him, and for the first time, he was no longer in control. Zane and Kara watched the events unfold, but they knew that the final confrontation was inevitable. A week passed in a blur. Zane's team continued to monitor the fallout. Blackwell's empire was crumbling, but he wasn't finished yet. The final battle would happen soon, and Zane could feel the tension rising. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore, it was a fight for everything. And then, it came. Zane received a call late one evening. It was from an unexpected source, Emily. "I can't run anymore," her voice came through shakily, fear evident in her tone. "Zane. I've been hiding, but I think they've found me. I don't know how much longer I have." Zane's heart pounded. "Where are you?" "I'm at the old warehouse on 14th Street. They're coming for me. I've told you everything I know. Please, don't let them win." Zane's mind raced. He knew he couldn't waste any more time. Emily had been his greatest betrayal, but now, she was in danger. He owed her one thing, help. "We'll come for you," he said, his voice firm. "Just stay safe. We're on our way." But he didn't get far. As he and Kara made their way to the warehouse, a convoy of Blackwell's men appeared, blocking their path. The final confrontation was upon them. The streets erupted into chaos. Zane and Kara fought their way through the alleyways, desperate to reach Emily before Blackwell's men could get to her. The adrenaline coursing through Zane's veins kept him moving, even as the danger escalated around them. But every step felt like it might be his last. The warehouse loomed ahead. Zane knew they had only moments before Blackwell's forces would catch up. He didn't know how many men Blackwell had at his disposal, but it didn't matter. Zane wasn't about to back down. He had come too far to let fear control him now. Inside the warehouse, Emily was waiting. She was pale, her eyes wide with terror, but she was alive. Zane rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. "You're safe now. We're getting you out of here." But as he turned to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Blackwell's men were closing in fast. They didn't have much time. "We have to go," Kara urged, grabbing Zane's arm. "Now." But it was too late. The warehouse doors slammed open, and Blackwell's men stormed in. Zane's pulse raced as the standoff began. He had no choice but to fight his way out. What followed was a blur, gunfire, shouts, chaos. Zane, Kara, and Emily fought with everything they had, but the numbers were overwhelming. Zane's thoughts raced, his heart hammering in his chest as he realized that this was it. The final moment. But just as Blackwell's men closed in, the sound of sirens filled the air. Reinforcements arrived, but they weren't from Blackwell's side. Law enforcement, spurred into action by the leaks and the pressure mounting from the public, arrived just in time. Blackwell's men were arrested. The warehouse was filled with flashing lights, the sound of shouting officers, and the clatter of handcuffs being clicked into place. Blackwell's empire was finally brought to its knees. Zane stood, breathing heavily, his body bruised but unbroken. Kara was by his side, and Emily, still shaking, clung to him. They had done it. They had won. Months later, the world was still reeling from the fallout of Blackwell's downfall. The criminal syndicates, the corrupt politicians, and the corporate giants who had long held the power in the shadows were exposed, their influence shattered. Blackwell was arrested, and the investigation into his operations was ongoing, but Zane had already begun to rebuild. The system had been broken, but now, there was hope. Zane had dedicated his life to exposing the truth, and in the end, he had brought justice to those who had been silenced for far too long. He and Kara worked together to help the victims who had been caught in the web of Blackwell's crimes, offering them the support and resources they needed to start over. Emily, after everything, had finally found a way to atone for her role in the destruction, working with Zane to support the reform efforts he was spearheading. Zane had lost much, his career, his trust in the system, and the life he once knew. But he had gained something far more valuable, a renewed sense of purpose. He had become the very thing he had once fought against, an advocate for justice, a voice for the voiceless. And as he looked out over the city, a place that had once seemed so hostile and indifferent, Zane knew that the battle for justice would never truly be over. But for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. The shadows were receding. And for the first time in a long time, Zane was free. And so, Zane's journey comes to an end, but the battle for justice is far from over. As the dust settles, one question remains: will the truth finally triumph over corruption? What do you think? Will Zane be able to change the system, or will the shadows continue to control everything? We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know how you think this story should unfold. If you've enjoyed this journey through power, betrayal, and justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of the action. We've got more thrilling stories coming your way, and trust us, you won't want to miss what's next. Thank you for watching The Shadow of Justice. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop seeking the truth.